What I'm about to tell you will make you never want to buy a house again. My name is Marcus, and 3 months ago I bought what seemed like the deal of a century, a massive Victorian mansion in Detroit for just $1. $1. But by the end of this story, you'll understand why I would pay millions to undo that purchase. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was scrolling through real estate listings, coffee getting cold in my hand, when I saw it. The listing that changed my life forever. Urgent sale, Victorian mansion, $1, cash only, no inspections. I stared at my screen. This had to be a joke. The photos showed a stunning 1890s Victorian house with intricate woodwork, stained glass windows, and a wraparound porch that belonged in a magazine. In Detroit's current market, this property should be worth at least $300,000. But there it was. Price, $1. I clicked refresh, thinking it was a typo. The price didn't change. $1. My hands were shaking as I dialed the number. The phone rang once before an elderly woman answered, like she'd been sitting next to it waiting. "Mrs. Henderson?" I asked. "You're calling about the house." Her voice was shaky, desperate. Not a question. "Yes, ma'am. Is the price correct? $1? "It is. Can you come tomorrow? Please. I need this done quickly." Something in her voice made my stomach drop. "What's the catch? Structural damage? Liens on the property?" Silence. Then, Some houses need the right owner. Are you a religious man, Marcus?" I never told her my name. The next morning I drove to Corktown, Detroit's oldest neighborhood. What I found made no sense. The house stood alone on a street where every other building had been demolished or abandoned. But this Victorian mansion was pristine, like it existed in a different decade entirely. Mrs. Henderson was waiting on the porch. She looked to be in her 80s with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. But what struck me most was her eyes. She was terrified of something. "Beautiful house," I said, trying to sound casual as we walked through the original hardwood floors. It was my grandmother's, then my mother's, then mine. She wouldn't make eye contact with me. Why sell for $1? She stopped walking. "Because money won't help where I'm going. But maybe you can break the chain." She handed me a key, an ornate old brass key that felt ice cold despite the warm September day. "Break what chain?" I asked. But Mrs. Henderson was already walking to her car. She turned back one last time, and I saw tears in her eyes. "Sign the papers. Move in immediately. And Marcus, don't go into the basement until you're ready for the truth." The paperwork was the strangest thing I'd ever seen in real estate. No inspection, no mortgage application, no title insurance. Just a simple deed transfer for $1. I signed. It still convinced this was some elaborate scam. That night, I got the call that changed everything. Mrs. Henderson had died in a car accident 2 hours after selling me the house. Single car crash on an empty road. The police said it looked like she was fleeing from something, but there was nothing behind her. I moved in the next day, boxes scattered throughout rooms that smelled like old wood and something I couldn't identify. As I was unpacking in the living room, I found a manila envelope tucked behind the mantelpiece. Inside were documents that made my blood run cold. Every deed to the house, going back to 1890. Every single owner had sold for exactly $1. And according to city records I pulled that night, every previous owner had died within 6 months of selling. Charles Morrison, 1890-1895, built the house, sold for $1, died in an industrial accident 4 months later. The Walsh family, 1895-1901, bought for $1, sold after their daughter disappeared. Entire family died in a house fire 3 months later. The Kowalski family, 1901-1923, bought for $1, sold after their son went mad, all found dead in the Detroit River 5 months later. 12 families. Always sold for $1, always dead within 6 months. I sat in that empty living room, surrounded by boxes, and asked myself the question that would haunt me for the next 182 days. What did I just buy? But that was just the beginning. Because the Next morning, I woke up to find every door in the house wide open, including the ones I knew I had locked. I spent that entire night researching every previous owner. What I found was a pattern so precise it couldn't be coincidence. Charles Morrison, wealthy industrialist who built the house, sold for $1 in 1895 after his business mysteriously collapsed overnight. Died 4 months later when machinery at his factory malfunctioned and crushed him. The Walsh family, Irish immigrants who bought the house during their most prosperous years, sold for $1 after their youngest daughter vanished from her bedroom. Parents died in a house fire 3 months later, trapped in a room with no apparent source of ignition. The Kowalski family, Polish family of 5 who lived there during Detroit's boom years, sold the house after their teenage son began speaking in languages he'd never learned and claiming he could see the dead. All 3 family members were found floating in the Detroit River 5 months later. The pattern continued through 12 families, each story more disturbing than the last. Always sold for exactly $1. Always death within 6 months. Always in ways that seemed like accidents, but followed the same timeline. Day 3 in the house. I woke up at 3 a.m. to find every door in the house standing open. Front door, back door, bedroom doors, closets, even cabinets in the kitchen. I knew I had locked the front and back doors before bed. I checked them twice. Day 5. My phone started ringing at exactly 3:33 a.m. When I answered, I heard my own voice on the other end, whispering the same phrase over and over, "Don't go to the basement." Don't go to the basement. I hung up and immediately checked my call log. The number calling me was my own number, but I was holding my phone. There was no way I could be calling myself. Day 7. I found scratches on the basement door. Fresh scratches carved deep into the wood. They weren't random. They spelled out dates. When I looked them up, they were the exact death dates of every previous owner. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door approached me while I was checking my mail. She was in her 70s, had lived in the neighborhood her entire life. "You bought the Henderson house?" she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am. Beautiful property." She glanced at the house nervously, like it might be listening. "My grandfather lived here when I was young. He used to tell stories about that place." "What kind of stories?" "About the man who built it. Charles Morrison. They say he made a deal with something that wasn't human. The house would always provide for its owner, give them everything they wanted, but every few years it gets hungry." I tried to laugh it off. Hungry for what? Mrs. Rodriguez looked me directly in the eyes. "For lives, mijo. That house feeds on death." That night I was lying in the master bedroom when I heard a sound I couldn't identify, like wood shifting, but rhythmic. I followed the sound to a spot where the wall sounded hollow. Behind a loose board I found a hidden compartment. Inside was a leather journal, the pages yellow with age. The name embossed on the cover made my hands shake. Charles Morrison. I opened to the first entry. March 15th, 1890. The foundation is complete. Used the special mortar as the Romanian woman instructed. She promised prosperity for my family in exchange for the ritual. "The house will provide," she said, "but it requires sustenance every 7 years." I flipped through pages of normal entries about construction, family life, business success. Then the tone changed. December 3rd, 1894. It's been 4 years since we moved in. The house has given us everything. Wealth beyond imagination, perfect health, happiness I never thought possible. But now it's asking for payment. Sarah can feel it too. The whispers from the basement, growing stronger every night. We must find someone else. The house must have its due. The final entry was dated January 1st, 1895. I understand now. The house doesn't just want an owner. It wants a willing sacrifice. But I found a loophole. If I can transfer ownership before the house claims me, the curse passes on. The next owner has 6 months to do the same, or they become the sacrifice. I've already found my replacement, a young Irish family, desperate for housing. They'll buy it for $1 and never question why. The house will provide a way to make them willing. It always does. But if anyone reading this thinks they can break the cycle, know this. The house owns you the moment you sign those papers. You can run, but you cannot hide. The house always collects its... The entry ended mid-sentence. The rest of the page was stained with what looked like dried blood. I heard footsteps upstairs, heavy, deliberate steps, walking from one end of the house to the other. But I was alone. I knew I was alone. I grabbed a baseball bat and followed the sound to the master bedroom. The footsteps stopped the moment I reached the doorway. On the mirror above the dresser, written in what looked like condensation, were the words, 120 days remaining. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check the basement. See what happens to those who don't pass it on. CM. Charles Morrison had been dead for 130 years. I knew I shouldn't go to the basement. Every instinct I had screamed against it. But when a dead man starts texting you, normal rules no longer apply. The brass key Mrs. Henderson had given me fit perfectly into a lock I swear hadn't been there before. The basement door opened with a sound like a coffin creaking open. The stairs were original wood, each step creaking ominously under my weight. But as I descended, I realized something impossible. The basement was massive, much larger than the house's footprint should have allowed. The stone walls looked medieval, like I was walking into a dungeon. At the center of the basement sat an ornate chair, almost throne-like, facing a wall I couldn't quite see in the darkness. When I turned on my flashlight, I dropped it immediately. The wall was covered in photographs. Hundreds of them. But these weren't normal family photos. Each image showed a person at the exact moment of their death. Charles Morrison, crushed under industrial machinery, his face frozen in shock and pain. The Walsh parents burning alive in their bedroom, reaching toward the camera as flames consumed them. The Kowalski family, drowning in the Detroit River, their eyes wide with terror as water filled their lungs. Every single person who had ever owned this house was on that wall, captured in their final, agonizing moment. And at the end of the wall, in a fresh frame that hadn't been there when I moved in, was Mrs. Henderson. In her car, seconds before the crash, her mouth open in a scream of absolute terror. You're wondering how the photos got there. I spun around so fast I nearly fell. A figure materialized from the shadows, Charles Morrison himself, but not as he appeared in his Victorian portraits upstairs. His face was gaunt, his clothes tattered and stained, and his eyes were black voids that seemed to pull light into them. "You're dead," I whispered. "Death is negotiable in this house. I made a deal in 1890. The house would provide everything I desired: wealth, health, happiness. But every 7 years, it requires a life, a willing sacrifice. Mrs. Henderson wasn't willing. No. But she found you. The house always provides a way. It calls to the next owner, makes them find the listing, makes the price irresistible. Free will is an illusion when the house wants you." Charles began to pace around the throne-like chair, his form flickering like a bad television signal. "Let me explain the rules, Marcus. Because understanding them is the only chance you have of surviving the next 120 days. He gestured to the wall of death photos. The original curse required one sacrifice every 7 years. Simple enough. But I found a loophole. What loophole? Instead of one death every 7 years, I created a system of rotating owners. Each owner gets exactly 6 months to find a replacement. The replacement must buy the house willingly for $1. If they succeed, they get 7 years of prosperity. Then the cycle repeats for them. The horrible logic was becoming clear. And if they fail to find a replacement, they become the sacrifice. But here's the beautiful part. If they do find someone, the house feeds more frequently. Instead of every 7 years, it feeds every 6 months. I get to exist in this space between life and death, watching, guiding, ensuring the system continues forever. You've been orchestrating this for 130 years? Charles smiled, and his teeth were black as coal. Every sale, every death, every family destroyed, all of it to keep me in this existence and keep the house fed. I backed toward the stairs, but they were gone. Just a stone wall where the staircase had been. The house owns you now, Marcus. Look at your hand. I looked down at my right palm. A black mark had appeared, a symbol that matched the ones carved into the basement walls. It looked like it had been burned into my skin, but I felt no pain. That's your countdown timer. It will spread up your arm as your 6 months tick away. When it reaches your heart, you die whether you've found a replacement or not. What if I just leave? What if I abandon the house? Mrs. Henderson tried that. How did it work out for her? Charles gestured to her photo on the wall. You can run. Anywhere in the world, Marcus. The house will find you. Car crash, industrial accident, medical emergency. The house always collects its due. Charles showed me a leather ledger filled with names, dates, and causes of death. Every owner was listed, along with detailed notes about how they died. Some lasted the full 6 months, he said, running his finger down the pages. Others, consumed by guilt over what they had to do, died much earlier. The stress, the moral weight, it breaks people. There has to be another way. Charles paused, his black eyes focusing on me with interest. There is one alternative, but it requires a sacrifice you might not be willing to make. What alternative? Break the cycle entirely, but it would require destroying the house's power source. And that power source, he gestured around the basement, is us. Every soul trapped here would be destroyed permanently. No afterlife, no peace, just nothing. I looked at the wall of photos, at all those faces frozen in death. They're all here, all the previous owners. Everyone who died because of this house exists in this space between life and death. We're trapped, yes, but we exist. Break the curse, and you erase us all completely. As if summoned by his words, other figures began to materialize around the basement. Dozens of them. Every person whose photo hung on that wall. Mrs. Henderson stepped forward, her form translucent, but unmistakably her. Marcus, she said, her voice echoing strangely. Don't listen to him. This isn't existence. It's torment. We feel every death, every new owner's terror. We're aware of everything but powerless to stop it. Another voice, a young woman. I was Mary Walsh. I was 8 years old when I disappeared. I've been 8 years old for 120 years, watching my parents burn over and over in my memory. An older man, Thomas Kowalski. I've watched my son drown every day for a century. This isn't life, boy. This is hell. Charles's form became more solid, more threatening. Enough. Marcus, you have a choice. Find someone to buy this house in the next 117 days, or join us permanently. Those are your only options. The lights went out. In the darkness, I heard all the trapped souls chanting the same phrase over and over. Feed the house. Feed the house. Feed the house. When the lights returned, I was alone in the basement. But on the wall, a new photo had appeared. It showed me, but older, broken, with the same black eyes as Charles. Underneath, written in fresh blood, were the words, 95 days. Remaining. My phone buzzed with a text. Time's running short, Marcus. Start looking for a buyer, or discover what happens to those who refuse. CM, I had 95 days to condemn an innocent person to death or die myself. What kind of choice is that? But when your survival is on the line, you'd be surprised what starts to seem reasonable. I spent 3 days researching, trying to find someone who deserved it. Someone who had hurt others, someone society wouldn't miss. I know how that sounds, but desperation changes your moral compass in ways you can't imagine until you're facing it. I found Danny Torres, 34 years old, recently released from Detroit Correctional after serving time for armed robbery. No family listed in his records, no permanent address, no steady employment. According to his parole officer, he was struggling to find housing because of his criminal background. Perfect, I thought. Someone who had made bad choices, someone who would understand the world, wasn't fair. I created a fake real estate listing. Second chance housing program, reformed individuals only, $1 symbolic payment for qualified applicants. Danny responded, within hours. We met at a coffee shop downtown. Danny was smaller than I expected, with tired eyes and hands that shook slightly when he lifted his coffee cup. He looked like someone who had been beaten down by life. $1? He asked, studying the printout I'd given him. What's the catch, man? No catch. I believe in second chances. The lie tasted like poison in my mouth. Look, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but nobody gives away houses. Especially not to guys like me. What's really going on? I could see hope in his eyes, mixed with suspicion. He wanted to believe it was real, but life had taught him that good things don't happen to people like him. I inherited the property. I just want it to go to someone who will appreciate it, someone who needs a real chance to start over. Danny leaned back in his chair. Man, if this is legit, I got nowhere else to go. Sleeping in shelters, can't get approved for anything because of my record. This would change my life. I felt the black mark on my palm burning, reminding me of my deadline. 87 days remaining. I took Danny to see the house the next morning. In daylight, it looked beautiful, welcoming. The Victorian architecture gleamed in the sun, and you could almost forget about the horrors hidden in the basement. Danny walked through each room with wonder, running his hands along the original woodwork, staring up at the high ceilings. This is really just $1? He asked for the third time. That's right. Why, though? I mean, you could get serious money for this place. Detroit's market is coming back. I almost told him the truth then. Almost. Instead, I said, I inherited it from an elderly relative. She always said she wanted it to go to someone who really needed it. Danny nodded, walking into what would have been his bedroom. I could get a job, get back on my feet, maybe even save up, eventually buy it from you for real money. The hope in his voice was killing me. We were sitting at the kitchen table, paperwork spread between us, when Danny's phone rang. He looked at the caller ID and frowned. My sister, he said. Haven't talked to her in 3 years, he answered. Maria, how did you get this number? I could hear a woman's voice on the other end, rapid and worried. Slow down. What dream? Danny, you were in a house and something was wrong. You were trapped, and there were other people there. Dead people. I woke up screaming. Danny's face went pale. He looked at me, then at the house around us. Maria, I'm looking at a place right now. Don't sign anything today. Please. I know it sounds crazy, but something told me to call you. Promise me you won't make any big decisions today. Danny was quiet for a long moment. Then, yeah, okay, I'll think about it overnight. He hung up and stood immediately. I'm sorry, man. My sister, she's got good instincts about people, about situations. If she's worried, the offer won't last, I said, panic creeping into my voice. I have other interested buyers, but Danny was already walking toward the door. Something feels off. I can't explain it, but my gut is telling me to walk away. I'm sorry. I watched him leave, knowing I'd just lost my best chance at survival. That night, the house showed me its displeasure. Every mirror in the place displayed a different version of my death. Car crashes, falls downstairs, electrocution, choking, an endless slideshow of ways I might die. The black mark on my palm had spread. Dark veins now crept up my wrist like infection. Charles appeared in my bedroom at 3 a.m. The house doesn't like hesitation, he said. Danny Torres was perfect, alone, desperate, few people who would miss him or investigate his death. You let him go. I couldn't do it. He trusted me. Conscience is a luxury you can't afford. 87 days remaining, and already the mark is spreading faster than usual. The house is impatient. There has to be another way. Charles laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. There is no other way. Find someone else, or join us on the wall. The supernatural activity intensified over the next few days. I would wake up buried alive in my backyard, dirt filling my mouth and nose, only to realize it was a dream so vivid I could taste the soil for hours afterward. My reflection in mirrors began aging rapidly, showing me what I would look like as my 6 months expired. I received constant phone calls from my own number, but now the voice on the other end was threatening me in my own voice. Find someone soon, or I'll make sure your death is slow. Food would rot the moment I touched it. Electronics malfunctioned around me. The house was making sure I understood the consequences of failure. Desperate, I tried online dating, targeting women who seemed vulnerable or isolated. I matched with Sarah, a 26-year-old recently divorced teacher new to Detroit. We met for dinner at a nice restaurant. She was kind, funny, talking about starting over after her divorce, about finding herself again. I'm actually looking for a place to rent. She mentioned over dessert, something with character, you know. I'm tired of sterile apartments. Funny you should mention that. I started my pitch, but then Sarah showed me something that stopped me cold. Photos of her children on her phone. They're staying with their dad this week, but next week they're with me full time. 2 boys, 5 and 7. I need somewhere safe for them, somewhere they can play and be kids. I stared at those innocent faces and felt something break inside me. I couldn't do it. I couldn't condemn children to this house. You know what? I said, I don't think the place I have in mind would be right for kids. Sarah looked disappointed, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Some lines you can't cross, even to save your own life. 2 days later, someone knocked on my door. It was Danny Torres. I did some research on this house, he said, holding a folder full of printouts. Found some weird stuff online. Thought you should know. He showed me newspaper clippings about previous owners' deaths, forum posts, about the mysterious $1 sales, even a paranormal investigation blog that had documented the house's history. You trying to kill me, man? He asked, but there was no anger in his voice, just sadness. I broke down. I told him everything, the curse, the deadline, the impossible choice I was facing. Instead of running, Danny sat down on my couch. So if you don't find someone in, he checked his phone for the date. 83 days you die? Yes. And if you do find someone, they die or have to find someone else to kill? Yes. Danny was quiet for a long time. Then, that's messed up, bro. But what if there's another way? What if we could break this thing instead of feeding it? Danny reached into his jacket and pulled out something that made my heart stop. An ancient medallion covered in symbols that matched the ones carved in my basement. My cellmate in prison was an old man named Albert. Said his family were curse breakers, people who specialized in ending supernatural cycles like this one. He placed the medallion on my coffee table. It was warm to the touch and seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Albert died last month, but before he passed, he gave me this. Said I'd know when to use it. Danny looked me in the eyes. But there's a catch. Breaking the curse requires the willing sacrifice of someone pure, of heart. We both realized the horrible truth at the same time. One of us was going to have to die to save the other. Danny and I spent the next week researching everything we could about Albert Kozlov and his medallion. What we discovered changed everything. I thought I knew about the curse. Albert's family, the Kozlovs, were Romanian immigrants who had spent generations breaking supernatural curses across Eastern Europe. According to the documents Danny had kept from prison, they were the same family who had originally helped Charles Morrison create the curse in 1890. Wait, I said, reading through Albert's handwritten notes. His family helped create this curse? Yeah, but they didn't know what Morrison really wanted. They thought they were helping him protect his family. When they realized what he'd actually done, they spent the next century trying to fix it. Albert's prison journal revealed the truth. The Morrison curse was one of 12 similar curses the Kozlovs had been tricked into creating in the 1890s. Albert had dedicated his life to breaking them, one by one. How many did he break? I asked. Danny flipped through the pages. 11. This house was supposed to be the last one. According to Albert's notes, the medallion would work, but only under very specific conditions. The curse can only be broken by a pure soul willingly offering their life to sever the chain of evil. Pure does not mean perfect. It means someone who chooses good despite their past, someone who acts selflessly when it matters most. Danny and I looked at each other across my kitchen table. I should do it, I said. This is my problem. I'm the one who bought the house. Nah, man, I got nothing to live for. No family, no real future. You've got your whole life ahead of you. Danny, you can't. Listen, Marcus. I've done bad things in my life. Hurt people for money. Maybe this is how I balance the scales, you know. Maybe this is why I ended up in that prison, why I met Albert, why I answered your ad. As we prepared for what we thought would be the ritual, Charles Morrison appeared in my living room. But he looked different, more solid, more desperate than I'd ever seen him. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said, his black eyes fixed on the medallion. "If you break this curse, every soul trapped in this house dies permanently. Not just me, everyone." "Good," I said. "You deserve to die. But not just me, Marcus. Everyone who ever died because of this house. Mrs. Henderson, the Walsh children, all of them. They're trapped here, yes, but they exist. Break the curse, and you erase them completely from existence. No afterlife, no peace, just nothing." This stopped me cold. "All of them?" Charles led us down to the basement, where dozens of ghostly figures stood in eternal silence. Every person whose photo hung on that wall of death. Mrs. Henderson stepped forward, her form more solid than I'd ever seen it. "Marcus, don't listen to him. We're not living down here, we're suffering. This isn't existence, it's an eternity of torment. We feel every new death, every owner's terror. Please, end this." A young girl, maybe 8 years old. "I'm Mary Walsh. I've been stuck at 8 years old for 124 years. I want to see my parents again, but not the way they are here. Please let us go." Danny had been quiet during this exchange, but suddenly he spoke up. "Albert was my grandfather." I stared at him. "What?" "My real grandfather. My mom was adopted when she was young, never told me the truth. But I found the papers after she died. Albert Kozlov was my biological grandfather." As if responding to this revelation, the medallion began to glow with inner light, pulsing in rhythm with Danny's heartbeat. "This is why I was in that prison cell with him, why I was the one who got out just in time to see your ad. The medallion called me here, Marcus. This was always supposed to be my fight." According to Albert's instructions, the ritual had to be performed at midnight on the anniversary of the original curse, which was in 3 days. The willing sacrifice had to sit in Charles Morrison's chair while holding the medallion and speaking the words of release. But the house wasn't going to let us break the curse without a fight. Over the next 2 days, the supernatural attacks intensified beyond anything I'd experienced. Physical manifestations tried to kill us both. Gas leaks that appeared from nowhere, electrical fires that started in empty rooms, the house literally trying to collapse on us. Psychological warfare that showed us visions of our deaths, our families suffering, everyone we'd ever cared about being tortured because of our actions. The house even tried to turn us against each other, showing Danny visions of me betraying him, showing me images of Danny planning to sacrifice me instead. On the night before the ritual, the house played its final card. It showed Danny a vision of what his life could be if I died instead. Danny would inherit my real estate business, become wealthy, meet a woman, have a family, live the life he'd always dreamed of. Then it showed me what would happen to Danny. If the curse continued, Danny would be forced to find another victim within 6 months, perpetuating the cycle, eventually becoming another Charles Morrison, trapped between life and death, orchestrating murders for eternity. Both visions were designed to tempt us and terrify us at the same time. "We both can't survive this," Danny said on our final night. "One of us has to die to save the other and end the curse." I pulled out a coin. "Then let's decide fairly. Heads, I do the ritual. Tails, you do it." But as I flipped the coin, Danny caught it midair. Some choices ain't meant for chance, bro. That's when I realized Danny had been planning to sacrifice himself all along. "You manipulated me," I said, understanding flooding over me. The coin flip, asking me to research the curse, everything. "You were always going to be the one to die. I'm a criminal, remember? But sometimes criminals do the right thing." Danny revealed he had contacted my sister Jennifer and told her everything, asking her to make sure I didn't try to sacrifice myself instead. "You got people who love you, Marcus. Real family. I got nobody but ghosts and regrets." I felt betrayed and grateful at the same time. "This isn't your responsibility." "Maybe not, but it's my choice." As midnight approached, we were interrupted by a knock at the door. Jennifer had arrived, but she wasn't alone. She brought Sarah, the divorced teacher I'd met for dinner, and, Mrs. Rodriguez, the neighbor who had warned me about the house. There's something Albert's notes didn't mention, Sarah said, revealing that she was actually a paranormal researcher who had been investigating the house independently. Something that changes everything. She showed us a final page from Albert's journal that Danny had missed. If multiple pure souls offer themselves willingly at the same moment, the curse breaks without requiring death. But all participants share the spiritual burden forever, connected to each other and to every soul. They free. Mrs. Rodriguez stepped forward. My grandfather was one of Albert's apprentices. This house killed my great-grandmother in 1923. I've been waiting my whole life for a chance to end this. Jennifer took my hand. I can't let my brother die, but I also can't let him live with the guilt of watching someone else die for him. 11:45 p.m., 15 minutes until midnight. 5 people stood in my living room, each willing to sacrifice everything to break a curse that had lasted 135 years. If we do this group ritual, I said, we'll all be connected forever. What kind of life is that? Better than the alternative, Mrs. Rodriguez said. How many more people die if we don't act? Sarah nodded. I've researched similar cases. There are 11 other cursed properties that were connected to this one. If we break this curse, we might be able to break all of them. Danny looked at each of us. So we're all in? No backing out? One by one, we nodded. As we headed down to the basement, for the final ritual, Charles Morrison appeared one last time, but he looked different, terrified. You don't understand what you're unleashing. The spiritual energy from breaking 12 curses simultaneously, it has to go somewhere. You 5 will become anchors for all that released energy. You'll be connected to each other and to every soul you free, forever. He gestured to the wall of death photos, where every image was now glowing with supernatural light. You'll be connected to every soul that was ever trapped by the curses, every death, every moment of suffering, every scream of anguish. You'll carry it all. As the clock struck 11:55, giving us 5 minutes to decide, Mrs. Henderson's spirit appeared beside Charles. He's telling the truth, she said. But Marcus, sometimes the right choice isn't the easy one. We're ready to be free, even if it means you 5 carry our pain forever. The medallion was burning hot in Danny's hand, and I could feel something calling to us from deep within the house's foundation. 11:55 p.m., 5 minutes remaining. The 5 of us stood in the basement, the medallion pulsing with energy in Danny's hand. Around us, the spirits of every person who had ever died because of the house watched in silence. Mrs. Rodriguez stepped forward first. My great-grandmother, Clara, died in this house in 1923. I've felt her presence my entire life calling for justice. If carrying that pain forever is the price of her freedom, I'll pay it. Sarah was next. I've dedicated my career to helping trapped spirits find peace. This is what I was meant to do. Jennifer squeezed my hand. Marcus is my brother. I won't let him face this alone. Danny looked at the medallion, then at each of us. Albert spent his whole life trying to break these curses. Guess it's time to finish what he started. I took a deep breath. If we're doing this, we do it together. 11:58 p.m. We formed a circle around Charles Morrison's throne, each placing one hand on the medallion. The moment our 5 hands touched, the basement filled with blinding light. Every trapped soul in the house became visible, not just the owners, but everyone who had ever died because of the curse. Hundreds of people spanning 135 years of death and suffering. We began to recite the words from Albert's journal. We offer our lives, our connection, our future peace, to break the chains that bind the innocent. Let our willing sacrifice free those who died unwillingly. Let our bond replace the bonds of death. As we spoke the final words, something extraordinary happened. The house began to change around us, not physically collapsing, but spiritually transforming. The walls between the living and dead crumbled. Every trapped soul began to dissolve into points of light, finally free to move on to whatever comes after death. Charles Morrison appeared in the center of our circle, but he looked completely different. Young again, human again, the black void of his eyes replaced with normal brown ones. "Thank you," he said, and for the first time in 135 years his voice carried genuine emotion. "I've been trapped longer than anyone, watching what I created, unable to stop it. You've given me what I never gave others, a choice." He looked at each of us individually. "The connection you'll share isn't a curse, it's a gift. Use it well." Charles faded into light, finally at peace. Midnight. The five of us woke up outside the house at dawn, lying on grass where the Victorian mansion had stood. The building was gone, completely gone, replaced by an empty lot with just the original foundation stones. But I could feel it immediately, the connection between us. Not intrusive thoughts or shared consciousness, but an awareness of the others. I could sense their emotions, their general well-being, even their approximate location. Danny sat up first, looking around in wonder. Did it work?" Sarah was already on her phone, checking news reports. "Look at this. 11 other abandoned properties across the country collapsed at exactly midnight last night. All of them were connected to similar curse cases I'd been researching." Mrs. Rodriguez was crying, but they were tears of relief. "She's gone. Clara's presence. It's finally peaceful. Jennifer helped me to my feet. How do you feel?" "Different," I said. "But not bad different. Like I'm part of something bigger now." 1 month later, we discovered that our connection wasn't a burden. It was exactly what Charles had said, a gift. The five of us had become a supernatural investigation team, able to sense cursed locations, help trapped spirits, and prevent others from falling into similar supernatural traps. Danny, using his street knowledge combined with our supernatural senses, had become incredibly effective at finding and stopping occult-related crimes before they could claim victims. Sarah's research had expanded globally. With our help, she was documenting and breaking similar curses in other countries, creating a network of people dedicated to ending supernatural suffering. Mrs. Rodriguez had become a medium, using her connection to the spirit world to help families communicate with deceased relatives and find closure. Jennifer documented our cases, creating a comprehensive record that would help future generations understand and combat supernatural threats. And me? I had found my purpose. Instead of buying and selling properties for profit, I was helping people escape from cursed locations, using my real estate knowledge to identify properties with dark histories. 6 weeks after breaking the Morrison curse, I was in my new office when my phone rang. A real estate agent from Chicago. "Mr. Johnson, I have a strange listing. A beautiful mansion in Lincoln Park, owner desperate to sell. They're asking just $1, but there's something odd about the paperwork." My blood ran cold, but this time it wasn't fear. It was recognition. "Let me guess," I said. "Every previous owner died within 6 months of selling." "How did you?" "Yes, exactly. The current owner is terrified, says the house is making her find a buyer. Are you interested in purchasing?" I felt the connection with my 4 partners activate. Across the city, I knew they had all felt the same chill, the same call to action. Actually, yes. But not as a buyer. We're coming to help. When we arrived in Chicago, we discovered something that changed everything we thought we knew about our mission. The Chicago house wasn't just similar to the Morrison house, it was identical. Same Victorian architecture, same layout, same basement throne room. But this one had been active for 150 years, longer than the Detroit house. "There's something you need to understand," the current owner, Elizabeth Kane, told us. "This isn't just about one family's curse. Charles Morrison didn't create 12 random cursed houses." She showed us documents that had been hidden in her house's walls, correspondence between Charles Morrison and 11 other wealthy industrialists from the 1890s. They formed a consortium, 12 men who made deals with the same Romanian family, creating identical curses in 12 major cities. It was designed to funnel power and wealth to their families for generations. Sarah's research suddenly made terrible sense. That's why the curses were all connected. Breaking one weakened all the others. Danny realized the implications first. How many people have died across all 12 properties? Elizabeth's research was thorough and horrifying. Based on the 6-month cycles, approximately 3,000 people, over the past 150 years, we spent the next week in Chicago, successfully breaking that curse using the same group ritual method. But as we prepared to leave, we realized our work was just beginning. There are probably other supernatural networks like this, Sarah said. Other wealthy families who made similar deals, other curse breakers like Albert's family working to stop them. Mrs. Rodriguez had been having visions. I'm seeing other locations, not just cursed houses, but cursed objects, cursed bloodlines, entire towns under supernatural influence. Jennifer was already planning our documentation strategy. We need to create a database, a resource for people who find themselves in supernatural situations. Danny was thinking practically. We're going to need funding, legal support, maybe even government connections if this gets big enough. I looked at my 4 partners, feeling the warmth of our connection, the shared sense of purpose that had replaced the terror I'd felt just months ago. Then that's what we'll do. We'll find every cursed location, every trapped soul, every family legacy of supernatural suffering, and we'll end it. As we were driving back to Detroit, Sarah got a call that changed everything. That was the National Archive, she said, hanging up with excitement. They found something in the Romanian immigration records from the 1880s. The family that helped create the Morrison curse. They didn't just work with those 12 industrialists. She pulled up documents on her laptop. They worked with 144 families across America, 12 sets of 12 curses, all connected, all feeding power to a central source. We drove in silence for a moment, processing the magnitude of what we'd discovered. So we didn't just break 12 curses, Danny said finally. We broke the first 12 of 144. And now the other 132 are going to be more active, Mrs. Rodriguez added. They'll need to feed more frequently to make up for the lost power. I felt our connection pulse with determination from all 5 of us simultaneously. Then we better get to work, I said. 6 months after buying a house for $1, I stood in our new headquarters, a converted warehouse in Detroit that served as base of operations for what we'd started calling the Kozlov Foundation, in honor of Albert. Our wall was covered with maps, photos, and research. 132 confirmed cursed locations across America, with reports of similar networks in Europe, Asia, and South America. Danny walked in with coffee and the morning's updates. 3 new cases overnight. A school in Portland where children keep disappearing, a hospital in Miami where patients are aging rapidly, and a church in Vermont where the congregation has been attending the same service for 40 years. Sarah was on a video call with researchers in Romania, tracing the original family's methods and looking for ways to break curses remotely. Mrs. Rodriguez was counseling families affected by supernatural events, helping them understand they weren't alone. Jennifer was interviewing survivors, building a database of supernatural encounters that would help others recognize the signs. My phone rang. Another real estate agent, another impossible property, another family trapped in a nightmare they didn't understand. Kozlov Foundation, Marcus speaking. How can we help? That night, the 5 of us sat in our shared living space above the headquarters. The connection we shared had grown stronger over the months, but it never felt intrusive. It felt like family. Do you ever regret it? Jennifer asked. Giving up normal lives for this? I thought about the question seriously. 6 months ago, I was a selfish real estate developer focused only on profit. Now I was part of something that mattered, something that saved lives. The house took everything from me, I said finally. My normal life, my solitude, my peace of mind. But it gave me something more valuable. Purpose and all of you. Danny raised his coffee mug. To the $1 house. Worst purchase ever. Best thing that ever happened to us. We laughed, feeling the warmth of our connection, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new families to save, new curses to break. The $1 house had taught me that some prices are worth paying, and some connections are worth keeping. Forever. My name is Marcus Johnson, and this was just the first chapter of our story. The Kozlov Foundation has investigated 47 cursed locations across America in the past 2 years. If you or someone you know is experiencing supernatural activity, especially related to property purchases, inheritance, or family curses. We're here to help. Remember, you are not alone, you are not crazy, and there is always hope. Next month, we're investigating the Portland School, the story of how we saved 200 children from a curse that had been stealing their futures for 50 years. And I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced something supernatural that you couldn't explain? Your story might be our next case, because sometimes the best deals come with the highest price. But sometimes paying that price leads you exactly where you're meant to be.